Committee of the Whole for the City Council of Highland Park, Illinois. It's February 10th, 2025. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brockman?
Here.
Councilmember Ross?
Here.
Councilmember Tapia?
Here.
Councilmember Littleworth?
Here.
Councilmember Stone?
Here.
Councilmember Bloomberg?
Here.
Mayor Verder?
Here, we have a quorum. We have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole held January 27th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those minutes are approved. Our scheduled business for this evening is concerning a building code and stretch code update. Joel Fontaine, Director of Community Development of the City of Highland Park. We await your wisdom.
Thank you, Mayor. That's an introduction. I'll try to do a good presentation for you. Okay, so this is about one of our major projects involving an area of code that touches basically every property owner at some point in time when they do anything to their buildings, whether it be an addition, renovation, upgrade, new construction, etc. And so what we're looking at here tonight is the building code and what's called the building energy stretch code. Staff seek feedback regarding adopting the Illinois Stretch Energy Code as part of the city's building code updates. So that's what we're trying to get your feedback here tonight. The city's building code update project consists of two subparts. One, updating the city's building code from the International Code Council's 2018 code cycle to the latest code cycle, which is the 2024 code cycle. That was published in September of 2024. And then two, assessing the Illinois Energy Stretch Code, which is available for adoption now as of January 1st, 2025. The state put that code together and is based on the ICC codes with some modifications. The city last updated its building code in February of 2020. Currently and more recently, the Illinois Energy Code was updated to the 2021 version. That's the ICC 21 version with amendments for the state. And that was January 2024. So you have the energy code that is promulgated by the state at this point, and that is on an independent track from the rest of the code family that we update on a local level. So the state, by state law, it's mandated that communities adopt essentially what the state code is. The energy codes are among the most cost-effective tools to meet a municipality's energy and climate goals. In 2021, the state adopted the Illinois Energy Transition Act. And per that act, the state developed what's called the Illinois Energy Stretch Code. The state's base goal, as I told you just the previous slide, the 2021 Energy and Conservation Code is mandatory and was effective in January of last year. The Illinois Energy Stretch Code is a local option for municipalities to go further in terms of requiring energy efficiency and getting the environmental and other benefits from that. Essentially, this code, the Energy Stretch Code, aligns with the city's environmental and sustainability goals and should be considered as a local option. Again, it's not mandatory, but it is a local option that has been developed by the state per the Illinois Energy Transition Act. The City of Highland Park has sought out opportunities to contribute to achieving greater energy efficiency. As some council members may recall, in 2019, the city supported the U.S. Conference of Mayors resolution that called for the 2021 IECC and future code versions to be on a glide path to net zero by 2050. This was essentially a concerted effort to essentially lobby, if you will, or advocate for this type of glide path that would take us to net zero by 2050. And the advocacy was that the International Code Council develop that as a path that they would follow for the international codes that come out each 3 years. So there's this glide path toward that net zero. Policy question.
Can we hold questions and comments until the end of the presentation? Or is it-
It's on this particular point.
Okay.
So just a clarification, that we supported that glide path to net zero, but the state code, when the state adopted the IEC, the 2021 IECC, they put in place some changes that watered down the energy efficiency provisions of that code. So the full 2021 IECC was not adopted by the state. They adopted a version that they modified. So I just
That's
wanted
correct.
to make sure that
And I had said
Clarification.
earlier that
Thank
the state adopts a code as amended by the state, yes.
and
And
there's a
so-
concerted effort by the roofing industry to reduce the energy efficiency requirements of that code, so that won out.
Councilmember
Thank you.
Stone is correct. There's a number of efforts, one of which we joined, which was to have the International Code Council use a glide path to 2050. And at the local level or the state level, there was lots of debate about what the state code might be. And in each cycle of code development, there are a number of stakeholders that are brought to the table, both at the International Code Council level and at the state level. And each do have influence over what ultimately gets decided and how it gets, and what ultimately gets voted on. And as Councilmember Stone indicated, the state version of the IECC 2021 is different than the Code Councils. So in terms of key policy questions, if you will, does the city want to be an early adopter of the Illinois Energy Stretch Code? And if the state's mandatory code is on a glide path to net zero by 2050, does that change the council's answer to the question above? The reason why I ask this question is because I want to understand what the council wants to do in terms of its leadership on this matter. You had said as a policy that in 2019 that we were encouraging this glide path to 2050. And so what we're looking at is the state's code, which is amended from the ICC code, and looking at, well, what path is that on versus the glide path to 2050? And so we would like your feedback on those questions, but let me finish my presentation first, if you may. Stretch codes, so trade-offs. There are benefits and there are some concerns with stretch codes. Benefits are adopting the Illinois Energy Stretch Code will lead to additional benefits, such as further reducing carbon and other greenhouse gas emissions, greater interior comfort, and lower long-term utility costs. It's about 9.1% more energy efficient than the state's mandatory base code. Concerns. There have been concerns expressed about ongoing housing affordability issues. As you know, in the last few years, given rates have changed and such, housing affordability has gotten much worse. The upfront nature of the investments, along with the long payback period, are of concern and often cited. Construction costs associated with new requirements are also brought up. Soft costs also. The building, and in terms of designing buildings, and energy modeling needed to demonstrate compliance. Training and review and enforcement are other matters that are brought up as well. Now, some of these costs or these concerns are built already into the codes that have been adopted, even the state's mandatory energy code. So what the incremental nature of all of these are is something that we're trying to discern with a little more accuracy. As Councilmember Stone mentioned, already the state is off that glide path that the International Code Council was what we encouraged to be on. And even at the International Code Council level, there's a lot of changes that are going on in terms of the stakeholder groups and how things got voted, as you might recall from the last time. They made some changes on how they approached the code. They've also decided to break some things off into separate code modules as opposed to keeping it in the base code family each cycle. So there's a lot of, how could I say, a lot of jockeying amongst the stakeholders in how the nation through its codes will achieve this net zero future that is desired by many. So, in terms of the state's stretch code, a lot of questions came up about, well, what does it cost? Like, how much more expensive would it be to design to that? And so there was a study done by the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and they found that related to the cost effectiveness of the residential provisions of the Illinois Stretch Code over a course of 30 years. I stress this is the residential stretch code, not commercial. Don't have good information yet that we've been able to find about the commercial end of things. But for the residential, they find a net positive life cycle energy cost savings of about $2,300, as well as a $6,500 in avoided future retrofit costs for electrified technologies. So the total life cycle cost savings is up to $8,800. And so they summarize as saying the average household can expect to save about 9–10%, $248 on an annual utility bill savings. So they're finding through this study, and the Capital Development Board at the state commissioned the study, and there's this memo that was written, and it's attached to your council item for this evening if you'd like more information. It does get pretty technical, but that kind of boils down that aspect of what it finds, and I think that's most important just to keep in your mind's eye. So long payback period, energy savings over that time period, significant carbon and greenhouse gas reductions over that time period, and it is common that folks look at energy efficiency, pollution prevention in terms of like dollars saved. Does it pay out? This shows that it will over the long run. But there's more than just the simple payout from a policy perspective that policymakers may also value. And so just simple payback may not be sufficient to capture the overall policy values and goods that are achieved through the reduction in greenhouse gas, carbon, and pollution prevention. So next steps, we were able to get together a seminar with the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, and they're great, they're very helpful. They want to come out to communities, and we were able to secure them for February 27th here at our City Hall to discuss improved energy efficiency benefits of the stretch code and other questions about this code. And so we're going to be hosting that here. We'll have some neighboring communities joining us to learn more about it and to ask questions as well. We're also going to survey other communities regarding whether they plan to adopt the energy stretch code. Frequently, council asks that. So what are other communities doing? So we're going to do that as well. We're also going to assess the incremental costs associated with design, construction, training, modeling, and enforcement over the base mandatory Illinois energy code. And this is important. Sure, all codes have those costs, right? But the question is you have before you stay on the mandatory base code or go to the stretch code. And so what is really the incremental difference there? I really want to put a finer point on that. We hear a lot of people saying some things, a lot of people saying other things. You read different points of view on these matters, and we're going to try to discern what's what. We also are going to look at as I mentioned before, the mandatory state code versus the state energy stretch code relative to the glide path to net zero by 2050 policy. As you recall, I mentioned about supporting that initiative in 2019. So we want to just see where are we related to where this council was in terms of, yeah, we do want to go that way. And how do these two things help us? Are they on that path? Are they not? As Councilmember Stone mentioned, the state did make amendments. And so does the state energy stretch code get us back on that path? Or is that even not on the path, et cetera? And then, of course, we'll present recommendations and amendments to council accordingly. And so this is all about one part of our building codes. It has to do with the energy code. We have a number, and that's why we call it a code family. We have a number of other codes that we're moving to the International Code Council's 2024 code cycle. That brings us up to the most up-to-date in our codes, and that's best practice. We looked at, do we go to 21 or 24? We thought it would be best to make the leap to 24. We want to reduce the number of times that we have to do this, but stay as current as we can along the way. And so if we just do 2021, then we'll be back doing it again. So that's part of the rationale. And what we saw in the 24s we thought made some sense for our community. So we're in the process now of looking at our local amendments to see how they relate to the 2024 code, making some revisions there, working in an interdepartmental team of staff doing that, led by the building division manager, and we'll be back with some recommendations on that. But this, as a separate project, although related, we can make those changes to the base codes that we're talking about, regardless of what we do here. We could stay on the state's mandatory, or we can go to the stretch. It does not, it's separate from those amendments that we need to make for the rest of the code. So I just wanted to make that clear for the council as well, just so that you can understand the interrelationship of the two projects.
And how, at one point, we had like 700 Highland Park code variances in our code. Where, have we removed those?
Yes, so that's a great question. So we had a
Can
number
you
of.
imagine coming in, it's like, oh, by the way, we have the 700 other things.
Local code amendments are part of what we review in depth. And so that's what we're looking at. Because the overarching goal would be to be as uniform as you can with the International Code Council's codes that are widely adopted throughout the United States. When you have local amendments, you really should look at them. Why are you amending this code that took 3 years to develop, had a whole bunch of stakeholders? What's your reason? So that's what I've asked them. If you tell me, we need to know what's the rationale, and if we're not really strong with that, then why are we doing it? And so that's what we're looking at for each of our local code amendments. I will tell you though, no codes are perfect. And there are needs for local code amendments, and we believe that they're needed and have adopted them in the past. But you're right, Mayor, we have reduced some over the years. We definitely did last time, and we look to do the same this time as codes catch up. A lot of times local code amendments involve something that is in development, but not yet in the code cycle you're adopting. But like you like that, and you're like, I don't want to wait till they do it then, or they didn't get it through this time, but they're getting it through next time. Let's do it, or some variation on that theme. Other things come from particular experiences and other matters that, like let's say the fire department has had with regard to various life safety matters that we want to have here in Highland Park and be a part of our local code. So I hope that answers your question. So generally, yes, we're looking to align more with the international code, except where we feel, that this makes sense on the local level.
Great, thank you. Kim?
Thanks. So you refer to the family of codes, Joel, and my understanding is that the energy conservation code that the state adopted is 2021 version. They haven't yet done the 2024, and then that we cannot make any changes or amendments to the energy conservation code.
Yeah, that's the state mandatory code. You have to be on that or the stretch code.
Okay, so
That's right.
so the codes that you're updating to 2024 are not the energy conservation code?
Correct. That's why I was saying that's like
Okay.
separate and
That's
apart.
separate.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Okay.
we have a choice between the stretch and the mandatory base, right, for the
And
stretch.
I've got a number of other
Yeah.
things.
Go for it. Uh-huh.
Okay. So you talked about the energy savings being, I think you said like $248 a year or something on the previous slide?
23.
Well, that's what
Something like that.
that study was indicating,
Okay,
yes.
so that's the average household?
Yes,
Highland Park
that's correct.
homes tend to be larger than
Much
the
larger.
average, so the
This is
savings
true.
would also be higher.
Absolutely.
You also talked about affordability being potentially a downside of adopting the stretch code. And I just want to note that SEPA has been incorporating strong energy efficiency features into their buildings for years, including
Yep.
renewable energy. Hyacinth Place, I think, was built maybe 15 or so years ago. And it's not only energy efficient, but it's also all electric, and they had a windmill
Right.
that was
turbine,
generating some of their
yeah.
power there. I know that was controversial at the time. But energy efficiency and renewable energy are especially important for people in affordable housing because the energy bills have a disproportionate impact on the budgets of income folks. So this makes things more affordable, not less affordable.
But this was talking about the upfront nature
Right.
of the investment to yield those savings over a long time. And so in the case of affordable housing units for which we have subsidy money and we can blunt that. But for the rest, what I call market rate affordable, that it doesn't have that subsidy, there's additional
But this
costs
is
to
for
have the
new
revenue.
construction and major rehab, which in Highland Park realistically probably is not gonna be affordable. The majority of the homes built in Highland Park are market rate buildings, so
Mhm.
I don't know that this is really gonna have a significant impact.
Okay, I was sharing with the council
But thank
what
you,
the
yeah.
concerns are from the dialogues that we can find,
Right.
that's all. Whether or not you feel it's significant or not to this particular jurisdiction, you know, that's a question, and every place is different in that way. We do have considerably costly homes being built, and so the incremental investment may not be as sensitive in terms of the elasticity of demand and such for our community as in other communities. That I can say too with mortgage interest rates. You know, we tend to be less boom bust because of the means of the people who live here, and so that's something to keep in mind, like Councilmember Stone said.
And the other thing is, this is really extremely important for meeting our greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals, since, as you noted in the staff report, buildings are the top source of greenhouse gas emissions in the region. And strengthening energy efficiency requirements would help reduce those emissions and save money for residents over a long period of time. So the additional expense of the upgrades typically has about a 10-year payback, is what I've read, and homes last a lot longer than 10 years. So it's cost-effective improvement. So, I mean, you know where I stand on stretch codes, right?
Which is what the
No secret.
Pacific Northwest National Laboratory.
Yeah.
And you're right, Councilmember, buildings use about 40% of America's energy, so they are a significant contributor to our use of energy.
Andres?
Yeah, so in principle or philosophy, you know, I like where the stretch goals are going. So, you know, for all the reasons that we want them. In reading what is known so far, Joel, and is that, to me, there's a lot of unanswered questions about the unintended consequences to the various stakeholders. And while I very much respect Councilmember Stone's arguments, that, well, that doesn't, it's not going to be as expensive as it needs to believe, or Highland Park houses are bigger, or, you know, the different points that have been made. Right now, I feel that we don't have enough information to really quantify what the actual costs are for homeowners, and let's say homeowners in Highland Park as opposed to homeowners in the Pacific Northwest, and also what the cost would be to the builders of the homes, and also with a cost-benefit analysis, I see the I think it was 8 or 9% improvement. But what does that mean? Like, how do you quantify that? How do you measure that? So I'm not quite sure. I would like to see a comprehensive view of, these are all the benefits, and here's the good things for the environment. Okay, fine. These are the savings over a long period of time because of the points that were just made by Councilmember Stone. Great. And then how does that compare to the added costs to the homeowners, to the developers, and even the soft costs? I just feel there's a lot of incomplete information to do a good analysis, that while I very much would want to say, yes, let's go for the stretch goals, I just want to make sure we don't commit to something that has a long tail of unintended consequences for too many people, too many stakeholders, in a way that it sort of robs from the benefit that we're after here. So I'm making an argument against it. I just am saying that
You
we're
don't have
missing a
enough
lot of
information
information
to
to
be able
make a good, responsible, holistic decision.
And I think today, frankly, this is information gathering more than making decisions about anything, just to kind of give us an update on where things are and to help us understand where staff is going. Joel's holding his hand up.
Yeah. But to that point, yeah, I know we're not making a decision on it, but I'm just saying, in the spirit of guidance for the
Right.
staff, to
What
say,
information
once
you're
it comes
looking
to us
for.
for decision,
Right.
these are the kinds of things, questions I'm gonna have.
We'll
Yeah.
definitely include that.
Absolutely. Yes,
Absolutely,
Joel.
and so, you know, in an effort to answer those questions, the state, the Capital Development Board, and, you know, a lot of people ask these questions of them, I did put together this, and that's the attempt at the residential end. And I noted before in my presentation, that's about residential, not commercial.
Right.
What about commercial? I don't have a lot of information right now, and so we're trying to find out more about, so what are the implications for commercial? But this is their best effort at that. And, you know, we'll see if they have any updates on that, of course. But I did include it in your packet. It's a bit technical, but it's, you know, it's a readable document. I mean, you could see what they've done there. They were pretty detailed oriented in it. And one could argue the particulars, but, you know, they did make that attempt.
You had a follow-up.
Yeah, just follow. And one of my concerns of unintended consequences is, you know, if the price of building goes up too high, and I don't know what too high is, but where the market starts to say, well, it costs a lot more to build these homes, we may start getting less, and I'm not gonna use affordable housing in the way that we mean it, but just homes that are affordable for just like, say, young professionals who are actually starting to get priced out of Highland Park. Like, we don't have enough housing stock for that category of income and rising professionals where they're trying to find places here and they can't afford them. I just wanna make sure that if this drives up the cost of building homes, developers may say, okay, fine, but in order to make the margins that we need to, we're gonna make more expensive homes or more expensive residential buildings, and therefore, we may reduce the stock of homes that really up-and-coming families or professionals are looking for. So that's an example of unintended consequence.
Thanks. And Joel, and then
That's-
actually I have a question for
Okay.
you, and that is,
Whichever you think.
you know, how many homes are being built from scratch at this point
That's what I was
versus
gonna say.
we are a community of mainly older homes, so.
Right, so that's one of the things, these are, you know, when we talk about the stakeholder groups, they're from everywhere.
Mhm.
Greenfield communities to already built out communities, but a very different impact, right, on those two communities. Like you say, Mayor, there aren't as many homes being built in Highland Park as there are in Greenfield communities. So that impact on the new home end of things is much more muted.
Right.
All right, it's a very gradual, incremental way. Now, having said that, that's for new home construction. Significant remodels and other things like that still are going to be, you know, having to do things like this as well. And we do have a number of those in our community, but still relatively small relative to the, you know, 10,000 or so parcels we have and units that we have in our community.
And how does this impact multifamily housing?
Well, you have, it depends on how many units. So you have your multifamily commercial is separate from the, what we would call the non-commercial, which is
Okay.
townhouses and single-family duplexes. They're handled differently than the, some of the larger buildings that are multi-story units.
Got it. Okay.
So what we do, to Councilmember Tapia's point, is don't really have a lot about the commercial impact. You know, this report, you know, I'd like to get one of these reports for that. That's
Right,
what I'd like to
right.
do. I don't have that just yet, and maybe it's out there, and we're doing our due diligence on that. Right now, staff is looking at our code amendments for that one part of the project. We're on this track here to try to fill those gaps in for council as well. The state did, though, through its process, include a lot of stakeholders. So as Councilmember Stone said, you know, they were influenced by that. It wasn't like they were in a vacuum, that's for sure. And I agree with you on that.
I
So-
testified, I was,
Yeah.
yes.
No, I know you know, but I just wanted to state, you know, I
Yeah.
agree. That is true.
Okay.
They
And
tried to
Annette
water
and
down
Barissa,
strategy.
then you.
Who's an aye? No?
Actually, no, it's Annette, Barissa, and then I saw you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So first of all, I too have an inordinate amount of questions, so please bear with me, but a couple are concrete and a couple are bigger picture too. I just didn't really understand a lot of what is provided and what are the energy efficiencies. And then I was really grateful to see that, you know, there's the 8,800. Is that in addition to the $248 on an annual basis? Was the first question.
That's a
pretty.
net.
That's
a
net of
Total
every-
life cycle means the entire period in question, the 30 years.
So the 248 is a part of the 8,800.
Yes.
Okay, so you're talking about $8,800 over 30 years. Okay, and that's cost savings. And again, I don't think this should be looked at only in terms of cost savings, but I don't understand what are the costs in building it. So if you want to comply, a lot of times when we have a referendum or something, or a bond or something, you explain what it's going to be the average cost per $500,000 home, per home on an annual basis. I'd really like to see the numbers broken down so we could really see what the cost of it is, because otherwise, this actually sounds very good. I mean, I'd like to have that kind of savings, but I don't know what that's measured against in terms of cost. So that was one of the questions. Philosophically, I completely agree with this. I love the idea of going forward with it, but I really don't feel like I understand enough about Glide, about the different things. I don't see what the programs are offering, or what do they in tangible terms mean. And I know that that's my own ignorance. This is not an area I know much about. I wasn't sure if Councilmember Stone was gonna brief us or you were, but I need a lot more of an explanation as to what they actually do to be able to make a determination as to which way we should go. Because it sounds great, but I still feel that there's just a lot out there that I don't understand. And the glide path was a big question. And again, the practical application is really the way I would love you to break it down to us. What does this mean to the average Highland Park homeowner? How many, to the mayor's point, how many potential homes are affected by this? If we're gonna do a guesstimate over a 10-year period, a 5-year period, I just wanna know what we're asking of people before we jump into it. Because it sounds like even within the industry, there's a lot of question and sort of parallel codes and requirements that might bring about some savings, but I just wanna know which one is really better for us to choose.
Great, thank you. Marissa?
So one of my questions I have is, since the report noted that the stretch code improves energy efficiency and we have the increase of the initial construction cost, what incentives or assistance programs would be available to home buyers and builders? Do we know those are out there, or if that's something that we could still look into?
Nothing. With Trump? No.
Yeah,
Well,
and it's
that was
such a changing
my question
environment.
was, given everything that we've heard, and the fact that they're basically trying to get rid of the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's like a layer on top of all of
Yeah.
this.
We're not, you know, that's part of the
Yeah.
uncertainty and risk
Yeah.
I'm
They're gonna continue.
involved in.
As of this afternoon, they're enjoined.
Yeah, really? Well, that's good.
He's enjoined.
Hmm?
As of this afternoon, the executive orders are
Enjoyed.
enjoined.
Right,
Stop.
right.
Stop.
Yes, yes. And then just another question that I had, which we already mentioned, was just I got additional information on the stretch code in terms of commercial properties. If we could see more information on that. But again, this all looks promising, and I like this idea. I just think more information would be helpful moving forward. But thank you for the report.
I want to say thank you too, because I know if you gave us any more information than what you've already given us, we would not have absorbed it anyhow. So take this as like step number one in this conversation.
Right. That was my goal, and I'm glad that worked. Great, thank you.
But we're not done yet.
I understand.
Amy is
We've got
next.
Thank you. Philosophically, I fully support the, stretch code concept, doing as much as we can. We are, as a community, as a country, as a world, we're facing climate change disaster. That's just a reality. And so at a certain level, I would say, I definitely want to support this. That said, I think we have to acknowledge, acknowledge that, well, you might not want to acknowledge this, but I'm going to say that there's probably not going to be a huge amount of, cost savings from energy, some of the latest energy efficient HVAC systems and whatnot. Light fixtures can be really expensive, and all of these things cost money. You can need very specialized technicians, maintenance. It's not just the upfront cost, there's the maintenance of these systems. And so I think it's really, really, really important that we, just a city council member, but the city staff, city manager team is working with other municipalities, because if it feels like we need to get on the same page about what we're doing, because we don't want to, Councilmember Tavia's point about, getting very expensive to build in Highland Park. You don't want people avoiding building here.
Right.
So that's my point. I think that if we can do this as, you know, in a you know, sort of team effort way with many other municipalities and all agree, is that possible? That we all agree that we're going for, say, the stretch model, and that you know, a builder or homeowner isn't going to turn, you know, to another city and say, well, it's gonna be cheaper to build there. I'm gonna build there.
That would be our plan.
And there was, I guess, yeah, that was my most important point. I think it is important that we get on the same page with, you know, sister cities. And in terms of updating our codes, is that something we do right away? Is that, you know, as soon as, like, is there a long delay in terms of adopting these codes?
Well, what do you mean, Melissa?
I mean, how quickly do we adopt?
Well, we're proposing to go to the 2024 this year.
Right, okay.
Okay, and so we
So
are
is
on the
that-
2018.
Historically, that's what we've.
So, yeah, it's good practice to not be more than, you want to stay no more than 2 code cycles behind. When you go to 3 code cycles behind, other folks start to get concerned about things. What I mean is the ISO and other things like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's good practice to do that. So we're on 18, so 24 would be our next jump based on what we looked at 21 and 24. And we thought
I
it was
just
the
want to make sure there isn't like a delay in.
Right, and I want to make sure I understand, Councilmember Ross, are you looking also for the process of how we basically adopt by reference the code, and we have it then available?
As soon as it's available?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's what
Can I just put a final point on that? Okay, 2 things. So, right now, if we're talking about the energy code, okay, the state of Illinois energy code, then what Steve's saying is, and we did do this when we last amended our code, we made sure that our code adopts by reference the state code, because it is a mandatory code. So there is nothing council needs to do to adopt the state code. So when the state went to the 2021 state
The
code.
council needs to do the
Yeah.
ordinance adopting by reference.
Well, I should say, we did that already, the last time we did our code. So there's nothing that you actively have to do to update to the state's mandatory base code. And in
But
point
it's
of fact,
mandatory and we.
automatically, yes,
And
by
in
reference.
adopting, we
Correct.
say we adopt the state code as the same may be amended from time to time.
Correct.
That was our enabling, our adopting ordinance.
Right, so that's already set. So, and then Councilmember Stone did ask this question when the state was saying, hey, we're going to the 2021, and she's like, so what do we have to do? We built it in, corporate counsel said, you know what, we talked about it, let's just make it a lockstep thing, there's no point in having to go back to council, it's a mandatory state code, then why does our code make sure to reference to it as amended? And so it does. So that's with regard to the state energy code. That doesn't take us to the stretch code, that's a local option that you could decide. So we're already current as you can be with the state energy code, 2021. Now, our other option is the stretch, but that's current. So when we go to 2024, we will not be doing that as it relates to the state of Illinois energy code. We will not, because that's the required code in the state. So we're talking about all the other parts of the code family. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yes.
And back to my first point about, I think, I just feel that's really important. I really am committed, I started by saying that, we're facing a environmental climate change cliff. And, we have to do as much as we can to address it. And I think we need to work in partnership, with other cities on this. Yeah.
Great point.
We will work in concert with them, yes.
Thank you.
We've
Tony?
done similar things with like the
So many.
leaf blower.
Right.
Thank you, Steve, I was just on the tip of my tongue. Leaf blower ordinance. And so, sure, but just know that you individually have the right to do it together or different, that's up to you, how you'd like to approach it. The state's goal by having by creating an energy stretch code was to have a common point of reference for those communities whose policymakers thought we should go beyond the minimum state mandatory code. And they wanted the municipalities to do that in an organized way, by using this common reference, the code that they developed, to either adopt or not. And so that's the thought behind that. Having more municipalities, let's say in the North Shore, do it so that we all do it at once, that's, I think, what's getting to your question. That's great. It's just harder to orchestrate, and we'll work on that and talk to our neighbors, and we intend to survey them and see where they are on their policy thinking on this and whether or not to adopt.
Right, Tony?
I think all that's great. I think the important thing is to do it, is to move forward as rapidly as possible. There are, as you mentioned, considerations beyond cost considerations, which is the end goal, which is the environmental goal that this is all about. The built-in costs, I don't know to what degree it's considered, but typically anytime we accelerate to the next era, if you will, of building codes, electrical codes, and so forth, what are predicted to be very high costs are very rapidly met, because it becomes an even playing field. We saw that, for instance, with the dark skies code, and there were predicted very high costs for energy efficient lighting fixtures that were going to be required by the dark skies code. But those are widely available, and ultimately the costs came down. It's in the interest, so much in the interest of pursuing this, that, for instance, in that instance, Commonwealth Edison began to subsidize the cost of LED bulbs, which were a large cost issue and are not anymore. So, like everybody here, I think more information is good, and we should make a decision based on as much available information as possible. I agree the absorption rate is somewhat limited. Like a solar panel, you can only absorb so much energy. But I think it's important not to, I guess the expression is to not let the perfect get in the way of the good. I think it's very important to move forward on as many of these initiatives as possible. We found typically that our neighboring communities follow suit. We essentially initiated the leaf blower issue with our neighboring communities, and we had a lot of success with that. So I would expect that here too.
Great, thank you. Yes, Kim?
One more, then I'll promise I'll shut up.
No, it's okay.
There are other states with stretch codes. I know you're familiar with Massachusetts. It's one of the biggest ones. So hopefully we'll be able to learn from those and maybe get some more information from how their experience has been. And maybe when you come back to us also, I believe we can adopt some elements of the stretch code. We don't have to adopt it entirely. And so that may be,
a little bit,
you know,
yeah. And so
something
that's
we should
something that
be
we need to
discussing.
look into more.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of, they've set this option, but you do have a little bit of the bells and whistles that might be able to be tweaked. The extent to which, what that implies cost-wise and energy savings-wise is gonna be a little bit difficult to discern, but yes, there's some flexibility there, if you will. And yes, pointing out the Massachusetts, the stretch code, yep, I was part of a municipality adopting that, what was it, 15 or more years ago?
Yeah, so Illinois is not a leader in this way by far. And there were some financial incentives to adopt stronger building codes that were available to states and municipalities if the states adopted the 2021 IECC in its entirety. And because Illinois watered that down, that money for training of staff is not available to us.
Yeah, and so, yeah, it's, like I said, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of discussion led to what's here before us, and just so that the council understands, and I hear what Councilmember Bloomberg is saying, it depends on where the council is, but the Energy Stretch Code, from Illinois Energy Stretch Code, it's ready. staff doesn't need to do anything, maybe a little tweak like here or there if there's some option, but like they're, you know, it's done. So just know that, okay? So adopting that doesn't take a lot of legal work or a lot of research on our part or Corporations Council's part. Unless you want it to. Do you see how much information you want? You know, that really comes down to you.
Well, and if it's really important, you know, we've determined that it was important to try to attract restaurants, and we've made funds available towards that goal. There's no reason that we can't make these things financially, to use a non-word, incentivized, to encourage people to live in and build houses that are healthier to the population in general.
More to come.
Mhm. Sounds good.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Feedback, much appreciated.
I don't think we have time for our entire closed session, but I do think we have time for potential litigation to be discussed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Just one item.
So if we could have a motion to go into closed session regarding potential litigation.
So moved pursuant to 5 ILCS section 120/2C11.
Second.
Thank you, staff.
Will the clerk please call the vote?
Councilmember Brockman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ross, Councilmember Tapia, Councilmember Littleworth,
Aye.
Councilmember Stone,
Aye.
Councilmember Blumer,
Aye.
Mayor Rotary.
Aye. 7 ayes, no nays. We will go into close. Thanks.
Good version 2.